probably the most common thing that we've worked together on is a privately held business. It's not a publicly traded business. It's not like shares of Coca-Cola. These are business entities that just owned privately. And there's no market for them. You can't go to the NASDAQ and sell your shares. And a lot of times we're talking about a business entity because it's a official entity like an LLC or corporation, but its business might just be that it owns rental property. It's not a business like it's got a bunch of employees and it's got a factory and all that kind of thing. So that's probably the most common situation that I get involved in. I know you get involved in all kinds of things, but to make it simple for our listeners. So when you're working with something like that, what are you looking at? How do you figure out the value of that business?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what I typically call those types of entities is we call them, real estate holding partnerships, and very often family real estate partnerships or something like that, because they're often all the other commensurate owners of that LLC are the members of the family, or some sort of hierarchy or family tree, some sort of relationship. And so there's really kind of two major approaches and ways that we go about constructing a value of those entities. But before I kind of go into that, I think the important distinction to understand and why there's more complexity to those types of valuations, because often I get the question of, well, I own 20% of this LLC that owns a rental property that's, a warehouse or whatever the type of property might be. What's the difference of just getting the underlying real estate appraised? Like, why am I involved?
Right.
And really, I think the key thing is understanding that, if you own 20%, let's say, of a real estate holding partnership, you don't own 20% of the underlying real property. You own 20% of the LLC that owns the real property. And the LLC might also own a bunch of other things. I've had very complicated valuations where you have one LLC that owns three other LLCs,
Right.
and one of them is an operating company, and you get this really nested crazy combination. And that's, whatever the trust attorney set up to create, that's that's the structure we have to operate under. But fundamentally, what the asset that is there is this 20% or whatever holding percentage of the underlying company. So the real two common approaches that we look at are, one is a net asset value. So we're looking at what is the underlying net asset value of this partnership. And really the primary focus of that is usually the real estate, less any debt, the cash that might be contained within the entity. I'm not actually a real estate appraiser. That's one types of area or type of asset we don't value. So we typically work with a third party real estate appraiser to value the underlying real estate, and then my valuation incorporates that real estate as part of what we do. The other way of looking at it is often an income type approach, where we look at, if this is a rental property or a multifamily, apartment complex, it often generates income. It's not usually something you're just holding to hang on to just because you want it to appreciate in value. You also want it to generate income. And so that source of income can be a proximal source of value. We do have to work really closely with the appraiser to make sure that that's often an approach the appraiser is also looking at when they're valuing the property. So we need to make sure we don't double dip.
You're not double counting something or Yeah. So the underlying asset value is like maybe more of a starting point. Like we this is what the real estate is worth, and there's a bank account, and there's an investment account, and there's maybe some computers, we don't know. Whatever this particular entity actually owns is assets. And that is maybe a starting point.